Welcome to Rich Planet TV. I'm Richard D. Hall. Tonight's guest has appeared on the show several times in the past and has just completed his first book entitled Your Thoughts Are Not Your Own. Now, recently we have had a number of so-called scandals in our media, and we're going to discuss some of them today because I think today's guest will probably agree with me that these stories are carefully orchestrated psyops rather than random scandals. Welcome to the show, Neil Sanders.
Thank you, Richard.
All right, then, Neil, I mentioned your book in the intro there. Just tell us about it, because it's actually two books.
Yeah, it was
Volume 1 and Volume 2, Your Thoughts Are Not Your Own.
Well, basically, it's a lot of information in there, basically. It was originally going to be one book, but unfortunately, just due to the sheer size of it, I thought it would be better to split it into two, because then it's slightly easier to cope with, really.
So, Volume 1 is subtitled Mind Control, Mass Manipulation and Perception Management.
Yeah, Volume 1 deals really with MKUltra, declassified documents, the Tavistock Institute and English mind control. It then looks at the various techniques, the admitted, documented techniques of mind control, hypnosis, trauma, various drugs and things like that. Psychotronic weaponry, electromagnetic waves and various devices that can cause mind control.
Right. So the nuts and bolts of mind control, essentially.
Absolutely, and then from there, basically, I've been able to have a look at certain people who were considered to be potential mind control victims, like Sirhan Sirhan and Mark Chapman. Also admitted mind control victims like Christine Di Nicola and Claudia Mullin and people like that. And then what I do at the end is I speculate in the first volume. I speculate on the strange similarities between the Phoenix program, which was an organised chaos. It was essentially violence against the civilians of the Vietnam War, and it was a CIA operation. And the remarkable similarities to the techniques that were used in that and serial killers that came about in America just after the finish of the Vietnam War.
All right. Now the second one is subtitled Mind Control, Mass Manipulation and Perception Management, and this covers the media and film.
Well, it's movies, marketing, movies and music, so it concentrates on a lot of the sort of social psychology, things like the herd instinct. Gustav Le Bon and people like that talk about the sort of mass hypnosis that can happen, how advertisers basically play on these psychological processes of the human brain, you know, without your sort of knowledge of it, and it's very, very powerful. And then what I go on to talk about is how the mainstream media, the entertainment industry, the music industry, how that's all used to sort of coerce people into different ways, how COINTELPRO and various things come in to silence artists that don't go along with the agenda. And then that one rounds up by sort of drawing back on the MKUltra. My postulation is that essentially the LSD explosion in America and the Haight-Ashbury and the anti-war movement essentially in music coming out of San Francisco was actually a military-industrial complex experiment. All the bands were intimately connected with the military-industrial complex, just in the same way that serial killers are usually.
Now, these books are available from richplanet.net. They're priced £15 plus postage. They're also available from Neil's website. Give us a domain name, Neil.
It's neilsandersmindcontrol.com, and on there basically there's the book, and there's also some videos, previous shows that we've done, and some radio shows and such like that.
Okay, all right. Now then, we spoke about the scandals that have been in our media. The Jimmy Savile one of note. What's going on with Jimmy Savile, Neil?
Well, I've totally forgotten about Jimmy Savile, I'm afraid. I'm beside myself with joy at the knowledge that Kate Middleton's pregnant. How can that not be great for the entire
We'll come on to that.
Jimmy Savile. I think the thing about Jimmy Savile is that what people don't perhaps realise is that it's not one person. Jimmy Savile is a tiny portion of an elite sex ring, and we spoke about this on sort of programs before, and we'll cover it today. The Franklin scandal was one of the main ones that we've talked about, and the Martin Preschool trial.
Right. So this is in the mid-1990s, is it? The Franklin
Franklin was
cover-up?
the mid-90s, yeah.
Right, so this is another sort of sex scandal with an element of cover-up and an element of putting certain information out as a scandal, but not all of the information. Just tell us how that works.
Well, I mean, firstly, just to sort of tie it back to the Wales care thing, my contention is that the Wales care home is not an instance where certain people have used their influence to attack these boys. And this is proven by the fact that the owner of the care home went to prison for basically...
So just backtrack a little, Neil, because some people won't be following this. Jimmy Savile is linked to a particular care home in Wales, is that right?
Well, yeah, Jimmy Savile has been linked to several instances, actually through hospitals as well, Stoke Mandeville, I think it's called, and... not Rampton, the psychiatric hospital.
And what does the mainstream media say went on, and what was the scandal at these establishments?
The mainstream media seems to say that basically Jimmy Savile, due to his fabulous influence and the fact that he was making so much money for charity, became a sort of untouchable person. And unbeknownst to absolutely everybody, he was using this influence to abuse literally hundreds and hundreds of children at the various institutions.
At these various children's homes and hospitals and schools, whatever.
Yeah.
Now, so what you're saying, that's not quite the full picture?
No, that's not quite the... In my mind, that's not quite the full picture. What it certainly appears to be is that maybe not all of these institutions, but certainly in this case, the care home in Wales was being utilised as essentially a brothel, so to speak. The children there are to be used as sex slaves for the members of Parliament, popular celebrities and people of influence. And this is not an unusual thing. This sounds strange and outrageous, but hopefully we'll go along the examples later. This is not uncommon. It's a military industrial complex intelligence agency style setup where they will use these kids for two purposes. One is just basically they're there for the leisure and pleasure of the celebrities, and the second reason that they're there is to be provided for blackmail against these very same celebrities. And this again, this was actually happening in MK Ultra. There was a lady called Claudia Mullen, and she testified before Congress in 1995, and actually was given compensation and an apology by President Clinton, that members of the MK Ultra, the doctors that were involved intimately in the beginnings of MK Ultra, were basically using her for that very same experience when she was 9. They were basically filming her with secret cameras and pimping her out.
If you think about it, if you get people, let's say, commit adultery or other misdemeanors, that's in the modern age, that's not really going to bother people. Whereas if someone's filmed having sex with an underage child, they can then be controlled.
Well, Silvio Berlusconi is considered to be quite the lad. Do you know what I mean? Like, he's got dozens and dozens of mistresses. He's going to all these prostitutes at his bunga bunga parties. Sarkozy's got a mistress. Everyone knows about this. And you know what it's presented as is, hey, you know what? If I had to go for a drink with a politician, I'd go with Silvio Berlusconi. Like, totally ignoring the fact that he's mafiaed up to here, and he was involved in the Propaganda Due scandal, and you know, when Roberto Calvi, God's banker, was hanged.
So just to get back to Savile then, you think that Savile was kind of a middleman in getting people to those establishments and then using those children? Is that what you're saying?
It certainly appears to be, and the thing with the Kate Middleton story about her pregnancy, to my mind, again, this is not proof, it's just what I think, is that this is being used as a convenient distraction to distract from the fact that Jimmy Savile was not only linked to these care homes, but he was intimately linked with the royal family. There's numerous photographs of him hanging out with various members of the royal family. Apparently, for some reason, he acted as a go-between, negotiating between Diana and Charles when their marriage was on the rocks. It's also come out in the mainstream media that Jimmy Savile was employed to provide guests for royal parties. Now, whether that is a euphemistic term for children, we don't know, but it's certainly, if you read between the lines, it's very strange.
So, in a way, they're possibly being used as some kind of a trap, you think? So you cite other examples where there's been a scandal, like the Franklin cover-up, and there's this Belgian serial killer, or mentioned several serial killers who you think were not just serial killers.
Yeah,
Tell us about them now, then, Neil.
Well, I mean, the connections to the scandal home are various places. There's Marc Dutroux was a guy in Belgium, and essentially it's very, very strange with Marc Dutroux because
so this is serial killer, killed lots of young girls and did all sorts of horrible things to them.
And 2 grown men. What happened was
he had a little sort of
it was a cell
underneath this house.
Yeah,
that he built
in a basement, which is another thing that comes up and again. People being trapped in cells beneath their house.
Yeah.
The specific thing about the Marc Dutroux case is that it came out in Belgium, and it actually caused a huge scandal because essentially it looked like there was a cover-up.
Yeah.
Furthermore to that, it doesn't just look like there's a cover-up, it almost looks like this guy Marc Dutroux was set up in a position to be able to do what he did. Initially he went to prison, he was given something like a 15 to 20 year sentence for the abduction and rape of 5 women. Him and his wife were basically abducted and raped these 5 women. For some strange reason, he was let out of prison after about 3 years. So incredibly early. It was actually a light sentence for what he'd done anyway. For some reason, he was able to get out of prison early. When he got out of prison, he immediately went around buying 7 houses. He apparently owned 6 or 7 houses, all completely paid for, despite the fact that he was unemployed. He was trained as an electrician, but he was apparently unemployed.
Right.
The interesting thing as well is that basically when he first came out of prison, he was awarded with a pension, an incredibly high pension, which is also unusual given the fact that he was in his 30s.
Right.
He was also given a prescription from the government for no apparent reason to be given an unlimited supply of Rohypnol. Now, Rohypnol, as you might know, is the date rape drug. It's the clear liquid you put in people's drinks, and basically people become completely. You can tell them to do whatever they want, and they will actually do it. So the question is, why is this this person doing it? Now, what is strange is the second that he came out of prison as well, his mother got in touch with the police and said, "You need to rearrest my son." I know that when he was released, his psychiatrist said we should never release this person.
Right.
He's a dangerous sex offender. Despite that, they still released him. His mother actually sent letters to the police saying, "My son has got 2 girls kidnapped and being held in a cell beneath his house." The police ignored this.
Right. And there are other instances when the police have searched his house and they've not found there was girls that have been kept in this cell. And so it looks as though the police were being.
Well,
the outrage in Belgium was that the whole system was protecting this guy.
Well, his house was searched twice by a gentleman called René Michaud. René Michaud was the head, basically it's the gendarmerie, which is the equivalent of local police to FBI in Belgium.
Right.
Now, what happens, the local police were really concerned about Marc Dutroux because all these girls were going missing, and for whatever reason, they were being given the runaround. What happened was, eventually, these 2 girls went missing, nothing was done about it. The parents of the children had to get a private detective. And he basically very soon said, we need to go and look at Marc Dutroux's house. What Marc Dutroux had been doing has been kidnapping girls, sexually abusing them and filming them, sometimes killing them and filming them, and manufacturing these videotapes with a series of accomplices. One of them was named Bernard Weinstein. He was actually a politician from France.
So that film would then be used to control
Well, the
politician.
Yeah, A, it could be used as a control for whoever it is that's in the group, and B, it could just be sold as a snuff film because there is a market for extreme pornography.
What I've heard is that what they'll do is they'll just send this politician or whoever it is a copy of it, of them doing this dastardly deed.
Yeah.
They then are under control.
What's strange, okay, is that basically his wife was a teacher and the other partner of his was a businessman, he was acquitted, I must say, for legal reasons, called Michel Nihoul. And he was basically he's like equivalent of like a sort of Richard Branson type character in Belgium. Now, as I say, what was going on with these kids were going missing and missing.
And there was a quote from him as well, Neil, where he alludes to the fact that I'm just a small cog.
Yeah, I'm just a small cog. Well, this is the point. When he was actually arrested and he went to trial, which took for some reason about 8 years to go to trial, which is a classic sort of stalling technique because witnesses die, people change their mind, people move away and stuff like that. when they eventually had to do the trial, by the time the trial had gone, 30 material witnesses had died. The other thing that suggests a cover-up is that basically when Reni Michaud went there to search with the gendarmerie, he went in there with an electrician. I don't know why he was in there with the electrician. The electrician came up from the cellar and says, "You need to go down to the cellar, there's children in here, I can hear their voices." They went down to the cellar, heard these children crying, and for some strange reason, Reni Michaud, rather than saying, "Is there anyone there?" seemingly talking to the electrician, but perhaps talking to the kids, went, "Silence! I can't hear any kids. I'm the police officer here. I'll thank you to keep your opinions to yourself."
So what's the inference here? That there's certain police in on it. There's maybe parts of the judiciary in on it. The government officials, whatever, are all part of some kind of paedophile ring, which is being protected. And this guy is the sort of evil person in the middle of it
who provides the kids. He kidnaps the children. Basically, they would drive along in a van. His friend would drive it, and they'd slide open the doors, grab the kids and throw them in the back, and that was it, which is remarkably similar to the way that Johnny Gosch was kidnapped, but we'll come on to that later. Surviving witnesses, because not all the children that were involved in it were killed. Some of them, a couple of them escaped actually, and a couple of them were rescued live on television by the Belgian police. They also told the same story of catering to elite people. They named very, very, very prominent people in Belgium, and also talked about child murders, alluding sort of to quasi-satanic ritual and that sort of thing.
I'll just stop you there, Neil, because we're going to go for the first break. We'll be talking more about Jimmy Savile after this. Welcome back. I'm talking to Neil Sanders about scandals in the media pertaining to children. Now then, Neil, there are other similar scandals. Fred West, there's the Joseph Fritzl case, there's the Franklin cover-up, and the Gacy case. You think that very similar things were going on in those cases? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean,
so let's just take Fred West then.
Well,
so you think there were other people involved going to his house, being filmed or what have you?
Yeah, I mean,
so it wasn't just him and his wife?
No. In fact,
did any of that come out of the trial? The other people that were involved?
Well, this is the interesting thing. The two people started talking about it, and both of them hung themselves in police custody.
Right.
That was Fred West and Fred West's brother John, who said that he wasn't involved in the murders, but he was involved in the orgies at the sex cult. What's interesting is that Fred West, some of the girls that basically sort of escaped their grasps or whatever, there's one particular one whose name I forget, she met them one night on the road. They pulled her over, and she'd previously known them but wasn't very keen on them. They tried to sort of lure her in the car by saying, "We're going to one of our parties. We're going to one of our famous parties with, local celebrities and people, so why not come along?" What's really strange is that basically the suggestion is that they were finding girls and stuff like that for these, again, elite sex parties. What's strange is that there is a video that exists of Fred West and his daughter Heather, who he apparently later killed, having sex, that is available on certain paedophile websites and such, and that's never actually been denied. What's strange, as I say, is that with the Fred West case, there's a couple of things that are unusual. Rosemary West was known to be a prostitute, and they filmed all her encounters for whatever reason. Okay. The other thing is that basically, as I say, him and his brother John both committed suicide. It's the second that Rosemary West said, "I'm not having anything to do with this," it was all Fred. Fred basically went into a complete depression, so should have been on 24-hour suicide watch, and was somehow able to hang himself in custody, because the last thing that he said before he did it was, "There are other people involved, I'm going to start talking."
Really? Right. Yeah. So he's possibly been murdered in custody, to stop the extent of this ring being revealed.
The other thing that was very strange about the victims of Fred West is that every single body that was found in his back garden had fingers from the hands missing, usually the left hands. Now, left hand, this is speculative, but if you were to kill somebody in a black magic style ritual, you would remove something of their left hand to show that you're a member of the left hand path. In witchcraft, if you do something like that, you will remove fingers from the left hand.
Never heard of that before.
Wow. Well, this is it. I'm not suggesting that thing, but it's a very curious coincidence if that is true.
All right then. Do you want to touch on some of the others? We've got Joseph Fritzl and I know this is pretty morbid stuff for people to listen to while they're eating their tea. But you go on then.
Well, I mean, the Joseph Fritzl thing, the thing that interested me about that was right at the beginning. For people that don't know who Joseph Fritzl was, he was I think he was Austrian, and basically he was imprisoning his daughter or daughters beneath the house in a secret lockup, exactly like Mark Dutroux. Okay.
And West as well.
And West, and Charles Ing, and Leonard Lake, and Dean Corlin, and various other ones. Okay, basically, he at the beginning it came out when his daughter escaped and she'd been pregnant, and you know, incestuous, multi-generational children and such like that. When it initially came out, it was suggested that local policemen, local sort of celebrities, local members of Parliament and stuff were also going to Fritzl's house. By the end of the investigation, even his wife didn't know that there was a secret. She just thought that the daughter ran away, which I don't believe for a second either. So, again, no proof, but it's certainly very, very strange. And was this an identical scenario where people are actually using children for this?
Okay, well, let's come back to Savile then. So why do you think they've brought out this revelations about Jimmy Savile now? To me, the reason why they would not do it while he was still alive is because if he's given evidence, he could just name everyone just to protect himself, right? So that's obviously one reason why it might only come out after he's dead. But why bring it out at all?
I'm not sure. To me, like again, my initial thought was it's to crack down on people who are making speculations on Twitter and stuff like that. It's to basically get rid of the sort of freedom of speech element of it.
Right.
Undoubtedly, it is to hide a broader scandal, because essentially the people that have been definitely named, even by the mainstream, are Cyril Smith, the MP, Jimmy Savile, Freddie Starr, who's persona non grata, Gary Glitter, who's persona non grata, and Peter Morrison. Peter Morrison was the private press secretary to Margaret Thatcher.
Now, just repeat something that you said to me earlier, Neil. I don't know. I'm not quite sure if you actually want to state this, but it could be relevant now. Wrote a book where he talks about handling the media and putting out information. If you've got a particular dangerous scandal that you want to hide, you put out something else which is not quite true, or just tell me what he says in that book.
The book is called The New Machiavelli, and in it basically what he says is that if there's ever a scandal that's going to come out, you take an element of it that is not true and force that through the mainstream so that you are accused of something that is not true, so that basically then you can deny that, garner public sympathy. The other thing that he says is if you're going to go on television, cultivate a speech impediment. Make yourself look dishevelled and silly, because then basically people will be sympathetic to you.
So how does that tie into the Savile thing? We don't want to, because I think he's threatened to sue people, hasn't he?
He has. Basically, well, the gentleman that you're referring to was named in an article by a magazine called Scallywag. Scallywag is kind of like a private eye type thing, and it did an investigation into this very care home about 15-20 years ago. And in that, basically, in the original Scallywag article, certain other people were named.
Because apparently there were
there's not just the
other mainstream publications were going to cover this, and they were warned off by MI5, is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even in the case of Cyril Smith basically was proven that, what's interesting about the Cyril Smith thing is, just like the Jimmy Savile thing, apparently mistakes were made. It was an open secret, everybody knew it, but what happened with Cyril Smith is he went to Private Eye, Ian Hislop thing, and said, if you reprint that, I'm going to sue you for libel.
Right.
Now, even though the story was true, he was basically tying them up and threatening them to not pursue this with libel. Thank God we don't live in an age where that could happen now.
Right.
This is exactly what's happened. But again, to my mind, why is this? What it looks like, because we're mentioning names, we're mentioning Cyril Smith, Savile, Starr, Peter Morrison. Peter Morrison, what's interesting about Peter Morrison was he was so well known as a pederast that in her memoirs, Edwina Currie wrote, it's a bit unfortunate getting Peter Morrison in to be the private press secretary of Margaret Thatcher, because he's known to be a paedophile. But it's all right, because he's assured Margaret Thatcher, myself, and whoever else has bothered to ask him that he's very discreet.
Right.
So
a pederast?
Pederast, somebody that aggressively attacks boys.
All right.
Pedophile, but aggressive with it.
Right. Now, All right, and so you think that there's just a tiny piece of this whole thing being put out with Savile and all the other people who've been named. You think it goes much further and deeper?
Well, I think the fact that we're naming individual names, okay, it puts, because most people don't know and don't frankly want to know that this is a tactic of the intelligence agencies to use these children for sex in whatever purpose, either for fun or for blackmail. And so it sounds like it's dirty old man going around. It's an individual case, and yeah, you know, unfortunately these safeguards should have been in place, but they weren't. And that's what's happened. I don't buy that for a second. I think, as I say, because of the connection to Franklin, the similarities to Franklin, the McMartin preschool trial, and all these other things, it looks very much like it's institutionalized.
Right. Okay. I'll stop you there, Neil. So it's institutionalized.
Yeah.
So who's orchestrating it?
Probably the intelligence agencies, for whatever reason, either for blackmail, like in the case of Franklin, like in the case of Jeffrey Epstein, or just for pure pleasure for the people. The thing that I'm reminded of is, again...
Is there any trail to the intelligence agencies? Can you actually...
There is rumours that basically, essentially, when they were investigating certain people, scallywags seem to imply that when they were investigating it, MI5 came down on them like a ton of bricks and basically said, don't investigate this anymore. It is a fact that a lot of the evidence that has been collected by the police connected to this case has been lost. The Gillings report, which was the report that was done 15 years ago, was sealed by the police. Now that's only just coming out. And the BBC have decided that any investigation into Jimmy Savile will be done in private.
Right, so control of the media, as we know, which we were going to discuss actually, is largely by intelligence agencies. They have a huge influence over them, and they work in people who are intelligence agencies work in the media. We know this. So... Okay, now there's the Haute de la Grande.
That's the one in Jersey, where essentially, again, a very similar scenario, a care home where the story was that these children were being pimped out to very rich clients, including stories of them being taken on yacht rides around the island and such like that.
You think it's the same thing there?
I think it's exactly the same thing. Essentially, the police went in and investigated. They got very top-level forensic scientists in and such, and found bones and blood. They found children's skulls. They'd been doing this investigation for 6 months until a higher echelon of the police came in and went, whoa, 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 hang on, let's have a look at this. And the higher echelon of the police turned out that these skulls that they'd found were actually bits of coconut. Are we really supposed to believe that the police for 6 months couldn't tell the difference between bone and coconut?
Yeah, well, we know that case was covered up, I think. So, okay, so back to the original question, which is, why would they even put out any of these people? Why would they expose any of it?
Well, essentially what they're doing is they're throwing corpses to the floor, to the masses. Like, okay, they're saying, okay...
Because a lot of these people have passed away, they're naming, aren't they?
Absolutely. I mean, it's very strange, right? There is still a very big question mark about why it has come out.
Right.
And the question is whether some of the original sort of witnesses, or the people who have now come out purporting to be the witnesses, are basically going to turn around and change their story, and then the whole incident might be used as a way to chastise the press for going off half-cocked. In a similar way to the way that people were naming people on Twitter, and they can say, hang on, you look back up because you're naming innocent people.
So they'll throw out a few red herrings for people to report on, and then they get chastised because they've got it wrong.
Yeah, like Max Clifford. It might come out that Max Clifford was accused by somebody completely out of the blue or something like that.
Right,
and then when it transpires, when he comes out and says, well, we can't have this, we can't have innocent people being vilified in the press.
Let's come on to him then. Now today I actually ran out of toilet paper, so I thought I'd kill two birds with one stone and buy a copy of The Sun. And we'll talk about this front page story in a moment, but the Max Clifford thing's in here. So see, this is a guy who's a linchpin in the mainstream media.
Yeah, Max Clifford does not get caught.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about something else about Max Clifford in a second.
Yeah.
I'm truly innocent, kiss and tell, Max fights back after 12 hours in cell. Now, do you think this could be one of these red herrings, that he's agreed to be thrown out? I'm not saying this is true, folks, I'm speculating as to what might be going on, that Clifford, with his media chums, has agreed, has said, yeah, arrest me, we'll prove it all wrong, and then that's the way of slapping the wrist.
Yeah, I think that's certainly a possibility. I think that's very possible. And what was interesting about when I was watching it basically on Thursday night, when he came out of the police station, most people won't see this as significant, but his car wasn't there. His car wasn't there. That never happens. You know, if you come out and do a press conference, you immediately get into your car. Strangely, his car was down the road. So poor, sad Max Clifford had to shuffle down the street, being papped all along the way, looking pathetic and walking down to his car.
So you think that is a bit of a psyop then?
I think that's a bit of media manipulation to frame him as, hang on, that's a bit off, isn't it?
So Savile is perhaps a genuine case, and you think that they may be putting out ones that aren't now,
possibly,
to sort of stop the net widening, if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. Because basically, what they're going to do is they're going to come in with a prefect and go, whoa, 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 whoa. We're all angry, we're all cross, but we're getting carried away with this now, and innocent people are getting hurt. Which is exactly what's been happening at the care homes.
Yeah, nothing would surprise me. Anyway, we're going to take another break and join us shortly. Welcome back. I'm talking to Neil Sanders, and we were just discussing the Sun newspaper. Now we're filming today on the Saturday the 8th of December, and the headline is Kate Shock as hoaxed nurse kills herself. So this is the story where some hoaxers in an Australian radio program ring the hospital where Kate was in. She was allegedly had morning sickness for 3 days. They rang up, pretended to be the Queen, and managed to get through. They spoke to a nurse, and they managed to get through and get some information. So it was all a bit of a joke. Yeah. And then supposedly, well, according to the Sun, this woman has now killed herself. Now, there's a huge hole in this story, right? Straight away, it says Kate Shock. Let me just state first: this woman may have killed herself, right? But it says Kate Shock as hoaxed nurse kills herself. You turn to the story. Let me just read part of it out, Neil. Sources said she was found unconscious by a worker from the hospital shortly after 9:30 a.m. But here's the key part: a post-mortem examination will be arranged. The death is being treated as unexplained. So the death's unexplained, and they've done no post-mortem and no inquest, right? So they don't know how she died, right? So how can they state on the front cover that she kills herself? So they don't. So that's jumping the gun, in my opinion. What it should say is Kate Shock as hoaxed nurse dies. Yeah. Right. So why are they wanting to put out the fact that she's killed herself before there's been a post-mortem or before they found out how she has died?
It's quite ironic, isn't it? Because that gentleman in question was suing people for, making statements that are not true or allegedly not true. Is that true?
Well, we don't know, but you see that. Let's just assume, or let's just hypothesize, and I'm not saying this is true, that she didn't kill herself and she was murdered. Okay, there's two motives I can think of. One, Kate goes into hospital for 3 days, supposedly with sickness because she's pregnant. Maybe something went on there when she was in hospital, and this nurse knew about it.
Possibly, yeah.
Or perhaps they wanted to demonise the Australian channel and the people who carried out this hoax against the Crown. Yeah. Right? Maybe that would be a motive to demonise the people who've done this prank.
It's also an extension of the distraction, isn't it? Because again, nobody's talking about Jimmy Savile, nobody's talking about... it's quite clever, really, because basically everyone went, oh, well, yeah, she's pregnant, that's wonderful. But let's not get distracted about this. What? Someone's dead? Oh, God, that's terrible. And it is, it's horrible that this woman has died. But if you were cynical-minded, if you took a step back, you could look at it and go, well, what a perfect distraction.
Now then, Neil, Philip Schofield was on his morning show questioning David Cameron. He pulls out this list of supposed people who've paedophiles or been named on a particular website, and someone said, oh, you could see one of those names on the screen, sort of thing, and there was a big scandal about it. You just think that thing was a whole setup?
Yeah, I think the entire thing was a complete setup. There's several questions that need to be asked, right? Okay, when does the Prime Minister of Great Britain and her territories get interviewed on This Morning? Never. And if he was going to be interviewed on This Morning, they'd have been advertising it for weeks and weeks in advance, saying, we've got David Cameron, he's going to talk to me about utter rubbish on the television. The second point is, when did Philip Schofield grow a pair? Philip Schofield.
When did he what?
Grow a pair.
What does that mean?
He's really going to get some balls. He's not a scoop journalist, right? Okay, he's not. He's Johnny middle of the road. Okay,
when did he grow a pair?
Yeah. When exactly? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, what was it? With the influence of who was it? Gordon the Gopher? Was that it? In his ear, going, you know what, Philip? You need to be a bit harder with these people, these women that come on this morning. Be a bit harsher with them. And luckily, it happened to be David Cameron. I don't believe it. I believe that just like the gentleman that we talked about earlier in the new Machiavelli, it was set up to make David Cameron look silly so that it garners sympathy. What's interesting about David Cameron's response as well, which is thoroughly offensive if you think about it, basically, Philip Schofield said these names have been named on the internet as possible paedophiles. And David Cameron said, I think there's a danger here that gay people could be demonised. Nobody had said that. But it's quite clever in a way, because basically informed people go, oh, he's right, actually. There is a danger that people who happen to be homosexual could get drawn into this scandal, so we need to be a bit careful. And people who aren't very informed go, yeah, he's right, they're all a bit like that, aren't they? And so it's clever in as much as it basically, again, it's like you said about a phony bone of contention. It's taken the argument from here and it's put it to here. If you're looking at that from David Cameron's perspective, either considering that it might be dangerous for people that, or you shouldn't do that, you're assuming that these people on this list are innocent.
So let's come on to why do you think that was orchestrated, if it was orchestrated then?
Purely just to get it in, to take control of it. Again, that was the precursor that basically allowed ITV to be sued. It allowed Newsnight to be sued. Not that they actually mentioned the person that sued them, but they still basically, they actually weren't sued. They gave a voluntary donation, and it's just a way of, again, in the public eye, taking control of the situation and chastising people, saying, well, I best not do that because I don't want what happened to Philip Schofield to happen to me.
All right, Neil. Well, you comparing the Savile thing with some of these other scandals, supposed scandals. So just tell us about.
Well, I mean, the one that was similar and recent was Penn State. Penn State is a university in America, and it transpired that Jerry Sandusky, one of the most sort of, he was a coach. He was involved with the American football team, and this is a hugely successful team, a hugely successful university, and it transpires that he's been having sex with the young boys against their will. And not only has he been doing that, but that's been covered up by the institution, by certain very well-respected people within the institution. And again, sporting instances of sex abuse within sporting institutions aren't uncommon. There was the Celtic scandal. There was a scandal with Gary Speed. Gary Speed, who also killed himself. His former mentor was apparently involved in a very similar scenario, abusing boys.
Gary Speed's former mentor?
Yeah, apparently so, yeah.
A football coach?
Yeah, apparently. Apparently Gary Speed was writing a book at the time that he hung himself.
Right. Do you know anything about the book?
Nobody does.
You got any thoughts on Gary Speed?
Well, I just wonder if he was going to talk about certain things like that. You know, this has been exposed on various websites.
So just go back a second. So Gary Speed's his mentor. Which mentor? When he was at a football club, or when he was younger?
When he was a youth and he was training, essentially, one of the people that was one of his main coaches was later exposed to have been abusing boys.
Right.
And again, this isn't uncommon. There was a scandal through Celtic football club.
Do you know what club that was at? Leeds.
I don't know. It was when he was a youth. It was when he was a very good. The article is actually on David Icke's website. What's interesting is it links it to various other people, including the MP Stephen Milligan, that died in suspicious circumstances.
So he was writing a book. You see, the thing is with Gary Speed, if you think about him, he was a manager of a national side and successful at the time. So this is, if you're a manager of a national side, you've got a voice. You've got a voice.
Oh yeah.
You're at a press conference where so people are going to listen to you.
Yeah.
So I can't help think that maybe there was something that he knew or was going to talk about. Very
possibly. I mean, the whole thing that ties in with all these things is that what we're looking at sporting institutions, care home institutions, charitable institutions, universities, preschools like the McMartin preschool that have all provably been involved in this sort of thing. I mean, the extension of and to prove this sort of connection to the elite, the extension of the Franklin scandal was it was connected to a gentleman called Craig Spence. Craig Spence was, I believe, he was a politician or an aide to the Republican Party. He was caught at like 2 in the morning taking a 15-year-old rent boy around the White House. Mm-hmm. When he was caught and questioned, he said that the lad was his nephew, which was provably untrue. So the question is, what we're looking at here, we're looking at MPs, sports players, we're looking at institutions, we're looking at money, sex, and we're looking at blackmail. And the other one that people need to really investigate is good friend of Prince Andrew and Peter Mendelsohn, Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein was doing exactly the same thing, a wealthy billionaire known to be a paedophile.
Can you say that, Neil?
Jeffrey Epstein? Yeah.
Oh, so he was.
Oh, he's been
in prison.
He's not been to prison. But he paid off a load of witnesses, but essentially
You sure you can say he's a paedophile? Does it say that here?
Oh, I don't
on
know.
Wikipedia. Well, you said it, Neil, not me.
Right. Whoa.
Well, I don't know. See, I'm not really.
There was a case with Jeffrey Epstein. Essentially, let me find it. Right, Jeffrey Epstein.
The Duke of York's, this is, it actually says it here, yeah. The Duke of York's billionaire paedophile friend kept a secret journal described as the Holy Grail by lawyers, which listed his alleged underage victims and the celebrity guests he entertained at his Florida mansion. Yeah. That's in the Daily Telegraph.
Whew, we're all right then. Okay. But basically, I mean, the woman that was pimping these girls or was luring these girls for Jeffrey Epstein was Ghislaine Maxwell, who's Robert Maxwell's daughter. Now, what was interesting about the Jeffrey Epstein case was it was a girl called Virginia Roberts came out, and basically there's all sorts of things actually in the first book, talking about drugging and basically being a masseuse at exclusive, I think it was a Rockefeller-run golf club actually, but the thing that Jeffrey Epstein was doing was taking groups of these girls at a time, taking them to his house in Mexico. So he's transporting underage prostitutes across the border, and all these houses were set up with hidden cameras, which is exactly, again, like the Franklin scandal, like the origins of the MK Ultra, like Operation Midnight Climax. It's basically the principal tenet of this is one of the things that we do. If we want to blackmail people, we film them having sex with somebody.
Right, okay. Yeah, it's disturbing. So how do you think you could expose and crack open this kind of activity?
I think it's very it's difficult. It's very difficult for a number of reasons, because one of the things is people don't want to realise that it is institutionalised. People will think that it is just
man in a raincoat. Man
in a raincoat, yeah, exactly. You know, dirty bloke at the end of the street and stuff like that. And it's not. It is institutionalised through the entertainment industry. Corey Haim and Corey Feldman, both the huge film stars, both talked about paedophilia being rampant through Hollywood as well.
What is wrong with these people, Neil? What is wrong with them?
And the other one that we've not discussed yet is Paul Gambaccini, who basically came out, Paul Gambaccini's radio disc jockey, came out saying, oh, it's worse than that. I know for a fact and can prove that Jimmy Savile was sleeping with dead bodies. Okay,
yeah, I've heard that as well.
He's a necrophile, and this came out for one day, and then it was completely shut up.
So he said this, and it was on various websites.
Yeah, well, it was in the Daily Mail, for God's sake.
Right, yeah. Okay.
And then that disappeared.
So he was given the key to the mortuary or something, allegedly?
Yeah, apparently so, yeah.
So do you believe that?
Yeah, I do. Like, I mean, he was given the key to the secure hospital and allowed to wander around and chat with the Yorkshire Ripper. Like, as well, do you know what I mean? Like, so it's not too far of a stretch. What's interesting about Paul Gambaccini is like, it was in for one day, and then if you go on the BBC website now, you'll find loads of advertisements for Paul Gambaccini's radio show.
So that information about Savile having sex with dead bodies comes from Paul Gambaccini?
Yeah.
And only Paul Gambaccini, is it? Or?
Yeah,
right,
so far.
right.
You then shut up about it,
right.
And since then he's been heavily publicised by the BBC, almost as if the squeaky wheel got the grease.
Right, explain what that means.
Essentially, they've gone to him and said, Paul, stop talking about this. You've got two choices. You mention it again, it won't be good for you. You don't mention it again, we're going to make you a star.
Right, so you were telling me before that he's recently appeared on quite a lot of BBC web pages.
Well, yeah, on the BBC.
In a positive light.
Well, he's advertising his radio show, which
right.
is not a new radio show. It's just
right.
all of a sudden he seems to be advertisable.
You think he's been told to shut up?
Yeah, probably.
Right.
Yeah, very possibly. Yeah. But you know, again, it's endemic through the entire industry. Jonathan King, Gary Glitter. Jonathan King, whose bail was paid by Simon Cowell. Why is Simon Cowell paying a third of, not all the bail, but why is he paying £5,000 bail for a guy that admitted to raping John Lennon? What's going on about that? The other thing that's interesting
John Lennon?
Apparently so, yeah. This is what Jonathan King said.
Jonathan King raped John Lennon?
Apparently, this is what I've heard with him. Well, he says it was consensual, but you know. John Lennon didn't say it, Jonathan King said this.
Is John Lennon gay?
No.
So why is it?
Because that's what he said. The other thing is, I tell you where you can get away with it. You can get away with it if you're Bill Wyman. You can get away with it if you're Pete Townsend. You get away with it if you're Jimmy Page. You get away with it if you're R. Kelly. You get away with it if you're Elvis.
Can you name all those people, Neil?
Get away with it.
Are you allowed to name all those people?
Yeah, it's in their autobiographies. Bill Wyman ran off with a 13-year-old girl. Jimmy Page ran off with a 14-year-old girl. Pete Townsend used his credit card to look at under 5 rape things. It was researching a book, obviously. R. Kelly is banned from his school, and there's a video of him urinating on a young girl. Elvis married Priscilla Presley when she was 13. Roman Polanski drugged and sodomized a 13-year-old girl.
Where are we going, Neil? I mean, you mentioned that the reason why these rings are not exposed is because possibly intelligence agencies may be involved who control the media and also control people in the police force.
Yeah.
So they can stop people being arrested, and they can stop stories coming out if they want to.
Yeah.
So tell us about what you know about intelligence agencies and their possible involvement with specifically to mind control.
Yeah,
because you think it could be some kind of mind control over some of these people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for example, Claudia Mullin, and this is proven, this is in court testimony, she was sent to a place when
this is in the States.
Yeah, when she was 9, she was sent to a place called Deep Creek Valley in Maryland to learn how to sexually pleasure men. Right, and this is at the behest of the CIA. Okay, Christine Di Nicola was sexually tortured when she was 4. Paul Benassi, who was involved in the Franklin saving and loan scandal, he's the person that kidnapped Johnny Gosch. He had 114 separate personalities in his head. Now, the key to creating alternate personalities is trauma, is traumatic abuse, because I mean it's quite interesting because essentially prostitution is a double-edged sword. Prostitutes have to sometimes take on a role, you know, basically to blank it out to get through it, and so they're an alternate personality, and then that repeated trauma again and again and again compounds that. And so especially when you're doing it to children and such like that, this gives them, they are ripe for then turning into mind-controlled subjects. The other element of the mind control is the perception management, the way that the media handles it and the way that the public see these things. And the first thing is the very concept that the public don't really think that this is possible. And again, why would you unless you actually bothered to look into this horrible stuff?
All right, Neil, well, that's all we've got time for today. We are going to talk about mind control in next week's show. But until then, believe none of what you hear and only half of what you see. I'm Richard D. Hall. Good night.
Thank you.